Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Mental Melodies. My name is Carmynn Bradley, and I am your host. I am going to chat with you for a bit and then actually bring on my first guest, so I'm pretty excited about that. It's been a really interesting week for me mentally, so I think I'm going to go back in my second episode and retouch on that vulnerability and talk about how healing is definitely not linear. That's something that a lot of people say in the healing community. They say healing is not linear, and I think it's a very, very important statement because it gives people, I think, the freedom to not be good all the time, because life is not all about being good all the time. And that's kind of what I've been struggling with, I guess you could say, in the last week. Because last week I was having a really hard time with my song, and this week I was not having so much of a hard time until I decided to change it. And there's just so much in that. The song that I wrote this week that I will sing at the end is about the meaning of life, whatever that is. And it's about how at the end of the day, life is, it's not just about one thing. People ask what the meaning of life is because I think people are confused about what they should do in a moment. And it all goes back to what we've been talking about in last episodes about just deciding what to do with your time. And so I've been mulling around with this idea that the meaning of life is happiness. But when I was trying to write a song about that, I had all these thoughts rolling around in my head. And I think that something I said last week that I believe in strongly is that life cannot be all one thing without the other. And though I think we're all on a journey to find our happiness and to increase positivity in our life, it is true that if life were all that, then it would be, I don't know if it would be boring, but it would definitely be missing something. Life has to be about all of those things, because if we're always just happy, then I think it would be more of a dystopian society where we're all the same, and maybe we're not thinking about what we actually want to do because we're just doing what everybody else is doing or something. And I think a lot of people that do just do what everybody else is doing do experience a lot of happiness because maybe they feel a sense of satisfaction. But at least for me personally, finding who I wanted to be was a journey that came with a lot of stuff that wasn't happy. There's a lot of grief and a lot of loss on this journey. And so again, just trying to work through that as I was writing a song this week was just so interesting, because I kept going back and forth in my mind about, well, I think life is about happiness, but if it's about happiness, it has to be about sadness, and maybe it's about love. Well, if it's about love, it also has to be about grief, because if you have these things, they don't exist in a vacuum. Weather is not always hot. Sometimes it's also cold. And I think that, I don't know, as I'm talking through this, it feels like I don't think the meaning of life is duality. I just think that life is all of it, and it's just not something that you can really quantify or define unless you get closer and closer and closer to who you want to be. If fate is real and if destiny is real, then for me, I believe the meaning of life is just to sing. And we've been talking about this, Maria and I, just about deciding what to do in a given moment, and how it's so hard when life is throwing things at you and they all might seem like really good things or really great opportunities, and you have to really be strong, I think, once you make a decision about who you want to be, and learn to say no and learn to make sacrifices. That's something that Maria said. I like to give people credit for their thoughts. But it's just true, and sometimes it's hard to filter out your own thoughts and other people's thoughts. And I guess in the last couple weeks, that's kind of what I've been dealing with. All of these imposter syndrome things coming out, you're not a real songwriter, or you're not where you meant to be. And it's interesting because it's such a shift for me in the last few weeks. I was feeling like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, and I'm very grateful for all of this. And I think the beautiful thing about upticks like this, which I believe I did mention in the second episode when I was I'm going a little crazy right now. I think these are chances and opportunities for us to heal. And so going back to my point about healing not being linear, it's important because it's not like I reach a certain spot and then I'm good, right? And then I just get to kind of sit back and relax and let life take me where it wants to go. I think that is the ultimate goal, that I can just always know what the right thing to do is in a moment, or I can always feel great about what I'm doing. But if I reached that point and I got there, then that would be inauthentic, because that's simply not the journey that we're going on, and there are so many unexpected things that can happen. So anyway, this little like uptick in, we'll call them symptoms, because I could classify this as, what would I classify it as? Would it be anxiety? I'm not sure. I have to think about that. Last week I was talking about like the voices and categorizing the voices, and I've been going through that the last couple days and doing a lot of writing and noticing that I have a lot of thoughts in my head, and that there's more than one like person or persona like talking, and it's been a little bit overwhelming. And the thing that I started to realize is that my songwriting cannot come from those spaces. As like I can overthink what life is about or what love is about, and then plan out what my song is going to be and write it all down and be like, yes, this makes logical sense. But most of the songs that I've written in the past month, I feel like have written themselves. And I believe that's how it's supposed to be. Like if there's a message that I'm meant to say, it will essentially write itself. So there's this balance between like meeting a deadline because I said I was going to have a song every week, and then also realizing that a song will not be authentic if I try to force it. And so again, there's just all this duality going on. And so let me see how to conceptualize this. I was thinking about the new moon. If you follow that, I follow the new moons and the full moons very, very closely, and I did that for a while. Very strategically, where I was following what was happening like astrologically so that I could see what was happening to me energetically. And I do that less now than I used to, but it was definitely a period of time where I used that as a healing tool. And now I can kind of tell intuitively when things are shifting for me energetically. Some people don't believe in that. I believe it's very scientific though. Like the moon affects the water. We're made up of 70% water. We're all a part of the earth. We're going to be affected energetically. It doesn't have to be like a voodoo type of thing, you know? But I can sense when things are changing for me. So when a full moon is coming up, I start to feel a little more depressed. And when a new moon is coming up, I start to feel a little more manic. It might be the opposite, but you get the idea. And so we're in kind of a new moon stage right now. And some of the astrologers that I follow, I'll like check their posts a couple times a month, and they were talking about how this specific new moon is supposed to bring up stuff for us to see and then be able to heal from. So I'm thinking about like the first episode, I was talking about awareness a lot and how the key to healing is awareness. So if these things are coming up, again, it's an opportunity for me to heal from them. And that's where it becomes a choice, I think, because like today I was experiencing a lot of like intrusive thoughts before this episode, and I could have leaned into that and just been like, this is not a great day, and I'm gonna quit, like I'm just gonna, I don't know, throw my hands up, like I'll just finish the song next week kind of thing. But what I did instead is I watched those voices in a sense, and I was acknowledging like, I'm feeling a little bit different right now, and I've been feeling a little bit different for a few days. So what can I do in order to feel how I want to feel, or give these feelings their time? And so just like going back to what I was saying about happiness and sadness like existing together, it was important for me today and for the last few days to acknowledge that I wasn't feeling the best and to give myself that time to sit with it. Because if my ultimate goal is to feel more happiness and more positivity, ironically, that means I have to give time to the negative emotions. Because if you don't, then they'll boil up, right? Like if you're feeling angry and you don't acknowledge it, then you'll tuck it away and put it in a little spot in your body, and then that becomes kind of like a button. I think all these like, they're like these little, I don't know, I have this image of these like ponds with like scum in them, and they just like sit in our subconscious and they grow, right? Like they're this own entity because they have energy. Emotions have energy, and if you don't release that energy, then they're just sitting inside of you, right? And I talked about how I think this was last week, about how that phenomenon, you could call it, is the direct link to disease. And like most physical diseases, I believe, can be healed or reversed through work on your emotions and on your body and on your relationship to the present moment, not to replace like modern medicine. But I do think that like if you go back centuries and centuries, healing was obviously not about the stuff we didn't know, like science. It was about how do we feel in this moment and how can the earth heal us. And I think getting back to that is actually really important. And there's so many different experts that talk about this in different ways. Like I've mentioned, Joe Dispenza, he wrote Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And he has this story in that book about a man who had cancer and he was able to heal it through manifestation is what Joe Dispenza talks about, but I don't remember the term that he calls it. I don't think he calls it that. But it's because he's actually legitimizing the topic of manifestation and making it a science, because it really is a science if you're able to tune into that energy. I'm going to shift because my guest is going to come on. His name is JC, and he has some stuff to talk about. We met up last week, and we talked about emotions, and so we're going to kind of continue with that discussion about emotions through his story and his personal experiences. So I will see you in a couple of minutes.
Traditional TV is going away. Hollywood is starting to fade. People are demanding real stories from real people. Our voices are now being heard in our own way. Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok Live are becoming the norm. Internet TV has now reached the highest demand in human history. Social media shows is now the new media of the century.
Got Films is a full-service production company that provides motion picture quality content and production services for use in the film and TV industry. Looking for a seasoned crew, high-quality equipment, or other production services for your film, TV, commercial, corporate convention, sports, news, or interview project? Your search stops here. Some of our projects include NASCAR, American Restoration, Pawn Stars, Counting Cars, Top Chef, BattleBots, Forge and Fire, and Street Outlaws. We have also produced over 60 feature films and documentaries. We're ready for all your needs. Whatever your project, whatever your budget, big or small, Got Films got you. GotFilms.com.
I'm just going to let him introduce himself and tell you guys a little bit about you, and then we'll kind of get into an interview.
Hi.
Hello.
Well, thank you for having me on your
course.
show. It's such a privilege. And I'm JC Crisologo, by the way, and I do have my own show in the social media shows network, Spotlight, doing movie reviews, Arise and Shine with our beautiful director-producer Maria, and Gizzy and his frenemies. I love making people laugh through comedy. Yes.
Yes, we definitely have bonded over laughing together, which I love. We're going to talk about emotions. I'm going to give him a chance to tell a little bit of his story about mental health. So, JC, could you tell me about like when you first recognized that you needed some mental health assistance, what you were struggling with, and what got you on your healing journey?
Well, definitely, as in my personal journey, because I called upon that higher power. And to me, that personal higher power was Christ. And I learned that I could come to him without masking anything, by not pretending to be somebody else, but truly come to him as I was, with all my baggage, with all my trauma, mm-hmm. my traumatic childhood, mm-hmm. Of being abandoned, despised, rejected, and discriminated upon.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's how it started, and also, well, thankfully I was able to find these mediums, if you will, through programs, the Christian programs like the Cross Current, Living Water, and then recently Celebrate Recovery. So they really dig in deep
Mm-hmm.
to where all those issues, started, to where it came from.
Yes.
Yes.
So knowing where your issues come
Mhm.
from is a really important thing. And in psychotherapy, you talk about that a lot. But that's like the first step, is knowing where they came from. You have to move past that also. So can you tell us about how knowing where it came from helped you?
I feel like in the beginning it was like quite a shock.
Mm-hmm.
When I found out things of why I became, this way, because I grew up in a very religious society or community
Mm-hmm.
in my country back home in the Philippines, and with my family, that like what you are is not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Your behavior isn't acceptable. Your desires
Mm-hmm.
are not acceptable because you're supposed to be. So that whole thing, I guess, kind of drove me a little bit insane.
Mm-hmm.
And I started wanting things that were not meant to be. Like I actually got involved with a family member.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. And, the more that they told me that this was right from wrong, the more that I did the wrong things. I did to cope.
Yeah.
To cope with the things that I was coping with.
Yeah.
So
We talked about this in the first or second episode, how essentially that's what mental illness is a coping mechanism.
mm-hmm.
So when we find ourselves getting into relationships we shouldn't be in because of patterns we're not aware of, not in a way, we can't blame ourselves for that, right? And then we get to a certain point where we're aware of it, and that's when we have the responsibility to change it, right? And you were telling me last week that you didn't even want to share this story on here, and yet you did.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that very powerful, because one of the takeaways, I think, from creating this show is that shame can't exist in other people, or around other people. If you tell your story, you're taking the power away, because I'm showing you that I accept you for who you are with your story. So I'm wondering if you can touch on that, like how shame has developed in you, and if you feel like you're past it.
Well, I'm definitely a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that I think that I've recovered, the more that I still see a lot of imperfections
Mm-hmm.
in me, and some insecurities
Mm-hmm.
from the past, fighting
Mm-hmm.
with my psychological demons, or literal ones.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like you haven't changed yet. You're
Mm-hmm.
still that insecure boy. You're still stuck in the day that a family member of yours traumatized you with hurting words.
Yeah.
And all those, harmful fantasies that I had towards this family member that not only brought me down, but also brought others down.
Yeah.
So, I developed some sort of PTSD. Because
Mm-hmm.
I thought I didn't have PTSD until I learned more about PTSD, and I said, oh, unfortunately, I think I have that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I was able to move past that through prayer and through counseling. And I did go through therapy,
Mm-hmm.
because I was asking in my church, you need to go to see this therapist
Mm-hmm.
because of those undealt issues,
Mm-hmm.
that you went through in your past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yes, definitely. Yeah. I'm trying to find a balance between
Mm-hmm.
you say something and it reminds me of a topic, that I've been talking about on the
Mm-hmm.
show, and I want to like reiterate that, but then also giving you space, which
Mm-hmm.
is one of the most important things about therapy, and goes back to what I said about shame, is that if you sit with another human being and they give you space to feel what you're feeling or to share your story, that in itself is healing without all the intellectualization and without the diagnoses and all of that. Yeah. Thoughts?
Well, I'm just happy that, I'm here to share what I've been through. It's not to wallow in self-pity, but to show people out there that there is light at the end of the dark tunnel. And I found that light, and it was very liberating. But before I found that light, I was mentally and emotionally abused by certain people. And I thought that I wouldn't recover, but I did. I was able to, through a miracle, emotionally detach myself from these people. That, to me, is a miracle by itself.
Yeah.
Because I was, as they call in living waters, they call it emotional idolatry, when you put somebody on a pedestal. And it's almost like you're making them out to be a god when they're the first ones to, put you down, persecute you. And the more that they see your weakness, they use that against you.
Yeah.
And, with the people in my past, I personally thank God that He was able to cut those unhealthy ties.
Yeah.
The ties that bind. That was a movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what you're saying is very profound and helpful, because when we're talking about awareness and like why it's important for healing, and also why it's important to talk about your childhood, right? Without, like you said, without living in self-pity, without repeating the story over and over again just to relive it or re-traumatize yourself. It's important because you can recognize like there are various types of people in the world, I think, right? And one of that types of people is a narcissist. And if you grew up with one of those, then your brain knows that and recognizes it and doesn't know how to get out of that pattern. So it's important to be able to recognize, I've been through this before, I feel the same thing here, and then you have to decide if you're going to walk away from it or not, or if you're going to continue in those patterns.
Right.
So I'm wondering, back when I first asked you about your healing journey, you said, well, I'm still a work in progress. I'm wondering if you could touch on why you know that you still have moved forward even when you have those moments, and what do you do when you have those moments to kind of bump yourself back on track or get to feeling better?
Well, now I realize that I really don't have the answers to everything, and that the man upstairs, I call God the man upstairs, has it. And like I said, the more that I discover about myself, the more I realize that I really don't have a clue about it. Anything. So I just surrender everything to Him, to the altar. And an altar for religious people looks like a pretty place with this and that. An altar actually back in the day was actually a bloody place where sacrifices were being committed. It was bloody. It was place where you literally saw blood because animals were slaughtered on that altar. And so I place myself on the altar and share my guts, everything. This is what I'm going through right now. And if you don't help me, I don't have a way out. And including my fears, and insecurities. And I know that we live in a very prideful world where everybody wants to appear strong and powerful. But in the eyes of that higher power, it's when I learned that I had to unmask myself and tell Him I'm weak.
Yeah.
I am weak.
Yeah. That's so interesting, because That's kind of how I started the episode, was with this like struggle of how much do you try and how much do you surrender? And that's a constant battle, you know, because I do think you have to be conscious about your healing, you know, and aware of all those things. Like I can't heal without taking all the nasty and putting it out there, right? Like your image was of like blood on an altar, and my image was like little pond scums inside of our brain. And whatever it is that makes sense to you, like visually or metaphorically, helps you then to take that energy literally out, you know, and give it to who you're giving it to.
I know my background are horror movies. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, I mean, whatever helps.
Oh my God.
Well, thank you for sharing with me and with us. We're going to have one more segment with you, and we'll be back after the break.
Hi, I'm Deacon T with Modern Word Ministries. It's great to be with you today. Just a short little promo for our show. Every Sunday morning we have service, and you can follow us at 10 a.m. Pacific Time on modernwordministries.org. And if you missed us or you want to see some of our older messages, go ahead and check us out on socialmediashows.com every single morning at 9 a.m. It's a great way to kick off your day, get a little bit of the word in you, get something uplifting, get you started off on your way. You know, if you're looking for prayer or you need some help, reach out to us. If you go to our website, again, that's modernwordministries.org, you can interact with me via telephone, via DM, text message, whatever you want. I'll get right back to you. So if you need prayer, you need help, you just need somebody to talk to, Modern Word Ministries is here for you. We are your church in the community. So until you see you next time, be blessed, everybody. Bye-bye.
Hello, everyone. This is Joseph Skoda with Social Media Shows. Well, I thank all of you for your support through these last several years, and it's been a lot of fun. We've given people a voice they never had before. Now, Social Media Shows is always collaborating with our veterans to help them do things and help out the veterans who are struggling today. And we teamed up with GI Connections, connecting veterans with resources. So please consider helping and donating to this great cause, because we're always doing things for veterans. So GI Connections, Social Media Shows, and you is what makes the world a better place. Once again, Joseph Skoda, proud United States Air Force veteran.
Welcome back to Mental Melodies. This is our third segment. I am here with JC, who's been sharing a lot of really vulnerable, personal, and valuable information about healing, and I personally am very grateful for it. Healing in isolation is not the way to go, and even this show, I think I've been isolated in it the last few weeks, and it just feels so good to have somebody here who is on their own healing journey and who could kind of help me conceptualize these topics to help other people who might be confused about where to start or get stuck too much in those moments. You know, like you're talking about being able to sit in that moment and be able to surrender. My follow-up question is like, how quickly do you get to that moment? Like, how quickly are you able to pull yourself out or be able to say like, okay, this is a moment where I just have to give it?
There's definitely days, and I want to share that most memorable day that I was alone in my apartment, and I actually like had a severe meltdown and like really, really ugly cry. And, you know, to share with your, you know, televiewers. And you know, I'm not trying to cram my beliefs on people's throats. So many throats out there.
So many.
Because it's my personal journey with a man upstairs.
Yeah.
So I cried to him, and that was the lowest moment in my life. Because this person that I truly loved basically told me that I was going to hell, you know, because of my desires and all that. And so I cried. I really cried. And I couldn't find a way out. And then, but I I opened my scripture, and then I was shocked with what I read. And then it said, although my servant will fall many times, I have the ability of making him stand, and I will make him stand. Mm-hmm. And I thought that he was,
speaking to you. Mm-hmm.
Directly.
Yeah.
And it was like emphatic, I will make him stand. It wasn't like a maybe.
Yeah.
So I guess it's safe to say now that he became my backbone and my strength. Mm. Because I didn't have a backbone. I didn't have a strength.
Yeah.
I didn't even have that spine to make me stand up.
Yeah.
And that is what the strength that was given me to nip the bud with this unhealthy relationship. Although I don't get me wrong, I still love this person, but no longer in an unhealthy way. Mm. I don't even have thoughts of like revenge or I gotta get even with this person, because I believe that's a very unhealthy thing to do, and that's just gonna make me swallow poison rather than moving forward with my recovery. Bitterness and revenge will just put me down all the more, and all the more I'll be doing the wrong things rather than the right things.
Yeah, it's like going back to what we said about just like putting all that nastiness on the altar. Like,
yes, nasty.
Probably one of the most profound things you've said, I think, because it just really, I think that's one thing that's wrong about our society now, is that people want to be too perfect, and people want to be that like Instagram worthy life, and people do want to just pretend that they're happy all the time, and that's simply not true. And I think to get to that point where you can be positive and you can surrender and you can feel these things like certainty, which are really hard to find, you do have to acknowledge that you have those things inside of you and say like, okay, do I want to have bitterness? Do I want to act on it? It's like what we've been saying in past episodes about emotions like guilt. You have them, acknowledge that, and then let them go. Don't sit in the bitterness and sit in the regret and sit in the shame and all of those things, because then you're going to turn into a shame monster. you know?
Yes.
Yeah. And then to your point about like you don't want to cram things down people's throats. I've said this before, but I just think everybody has their own framework for the same things. I talk about surrendering to the energy of the universe, and that's in my mind the same thing. And I think it's important to be able to own what it is that has helped you heal.
Yes.
So that's just kind of an aside. So I guess when it comes to I don't know what to ask next, because I'm very touched by your story, and
Thank
I'm very
you.
Touched by
and I'm very
your
touched
honesty.
for being here when I was told that your show was Mental Melodies, and that you're a licensed therapist and all that. I said, this is a beautiful show.
Thank you.
That I could share to people out there who are struggling or who are in darkness or dealing with their own personal demons. That perhaps if I share my story, will be able to reach that person out.
Yeah, 100%. And going back to that thing about like healing not being in isolation, I think therapy is so valuable, and very, very important, like I said, to be able to sit across from somebody and have them help share your load or just validate what you're feeling. But it is almost too isolated, and I think that like even too secret, where you go and tell somebody your things and then you leave, and then maybe there are people in your life you can't talk about that with. So therapy is just like 1 hour a week, and maybe it needs to not be that way, I guess. Like the fact that you can come here and talk to me and I can give you an experience like that, you can give me an experience like that, but people can watch and people can see the process and how healing it is to be able to share your story, and how healing it is to not have to feel like you have to hide. Like I think that is somewhere that our world needs to go. Like therapists are in our world because our world denies all the bloody and the bad, right? So we have to have a space for people to come to vent about those things and then go back to their life and continue to pretend to be happy. And that's not the goal, you know. I think you should be able to be realistic about those things all the time, but obviously things get in the way of that.
Things get in the way, and pretending to be happy isn't good either. I mean, perfect example, we have Robin Williams, who we thought was very happy, and he ended up committing suicide. And the world was shocked, like, why would a comedian who's making others happy end his life? So obviously, not to blame Robin Williams, there were some undealt issues that were not confessed to people that he could be vulnerable with.
And suicidal thoughts, I think, are one of the hardest things for people to admit. Like, when it comes to like a therapy setting, I mean, you don't want to tell your therapist because you're going to be committed or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And then to give that weight to a family member, like, that's really, really tough. So, that is eye-opening to think that somebody who is in the public eye couldn't be honest about
a big star, a big celebrity.
Yes.
And to think that behind the camera, you know, feeling vulnerable in a dark place and battling those demons, and he was probably screaming. And I could relate to him because there was a time in my life that I did feel suicidal. I had those suicidal thoughts because they made me believe, society made me believe that I'm not functioning the way, you know, I'm supposed to function. You were born this way, physically born this way. Therefore, you should be, you know, this way.
Yeah, we talked about that last week, like fitting in a box and how that is so detrimental to our health, to be somebody who is different, you know, from how society expects us to be. And then, I think I'm thinking about the process of that. Like, then you start internalizing what people say to you, and then those thoughts are what attack you, you know. And I think that, again, going back to like, why is it important to know why you are the way that you are, or what trauma created your coping mechanisms? That's huge, because when it comes to winning the battle against suicidal thoughts, you have to know, because sometimes the voice in your head will, if you get to a point where you can see it subconsciously, will look like your mother or your aunt. These are people in his life who abused him. And so we have to be able to separate ourselves from that voice and say, this isn't me. But when it's coming from your own head, that's really, really hard to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
It truly is.
So
oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness, what?
I love it. I love this topic. I love this conversation.
Yes. Yeah, me too. Yeah. I was going to ask you about, because you had shared that with me, but I'm glad that you shared it on your own, because I didn't want you to have to bring that up. But you did. And again, it's just like what you said earlier. I think it's so important to feel safe to be able to talk about those things, you know, because it really devalues what people think about it, because that matters less and less to me now. You know, like, I can admit that I have been suicidal, or that I've even tried to kill myself. And that used to be such a point of shame, and I would say it out loud, and then, you know, the feelings I had about it would get reinforced. How do you think that you got to that point where what other people thought about that lost its power?
So, in my case, when I had that encounter with that higher power, I felt joy, the joy that I have not felt before. And the joy that replaced all the sadness and the deep depression. I was like, oh my goodness, like, how did this even happen? Because just a month ago or a few weeks ago, I felt suicidal. And then now I feel so happy. You know, and so my mantra, and a lot of even, I think that even my fellow my fellow Christians take this scripture for granted. The joy of the Lord is my strength.
Yeah.
And being happy and joyful deep down inside you is so important.
Yeah.
So as not to entertain those negative and evil thoughts.
Yeah.
If
Can
you-
I jump
yeah.
to an assumption and say that joy then comes from like accepting who you are wholly and fully? You think it's more than
In
that?
my case, it's more on like how could this perfect being who created the entire universe, and I am so broken and imperfect, how could he possibly love me? But he did, in my broken state. And it's almost like being, I know this is shallow, but the unpopular kid in school, and there's the most popular jock or the prom queen. And that person has accepted you and not ashamed to be with you.
Yeah.
Something to that effect.
So ultimately feeling valued and feeling important and feeling like beautiful and complete and whole in yourself no matter what, despite everything.
Yes. And it's just like one last thing about that love song from the old horror movie Carrie. I never dreamed that someone like you could love someone like me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's a beautiful line to wrap up this segment. So do you have anything that you might want to say to the viewers before we say goodbye?
Well, thank you for inviting me to your show, and thank you for letting me share my journey with your viewers. It's not over yet.
Yes. We are all in it together.
Yeah, we're all in it together. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for sharing again and for being with me and just for engaging with me. I really appreciate you. And for you all, we will be back in a couple minutes, and I've got a song and I will wrap things up.
What affects your credit? The answer can be many things. Let's take a look at a few of the most common factors and how they can impact your credit. Credit history. In order to have a credit score, you need to have open and active credit accounts. This gives you the opportunity to build a credit score and get approved for larger purchases such as a car or a home. So it's important to have a responsible record of debt repayment. Available credit and usage. The rule of thumb is to use 30% of your available credit to minimize the impact of debt on your credit score. In other words, the less credit you use, the better. Monthly on-time payments. By making sure your monthly payments are paid on time, you could boost your credit score. Late payments, however, may bring your score down. Errors on your credit report. Check your credit report regularly to make sure it's accurate. If there are any errors or signs of identity theft, report them immediately to the appropriate credit bureau. Applications for credit. If you're applying for credit, filling out several applications in a short amount of time may hurt your credit score. It's ideal to keep the applications to a minimum. However, there is an allowable shopping window for a mortgage. Remember, a good credit score could possibly save you in interest payments. If your credit score needs some improvement, however, consider starting with the basics mentioned here. And when you're ready to buy your dream home, give New American Funding a call. We'll help you find a home loan that works for you and your unique situation.
Now on digital and DVD.
Did it?
Space Wars Quest for the Deep Star is an epic sci-fi adventure.
Do what needs to be done.
An edge-of-your-seat wild ride.
We have company.
Tons of popcorn-munching fun. 5 stars. A love letter to the sci-fi films of the 70s and 80s. With plenty of action and fun for all. You need to see it. You really do.
The captain just decided it's time to go.
I am ready for a sequel. Experience a bold new adventure. Space Wars Quest for the Deep Star.
A good old-fashioned adventure.
Now on digital and DVD.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Mental Melodies. This is Carmynn Bradley here, your host. Thank you for tuning in, thank you for listening, thank you for your eyes and your ears, and thank you for listening to the very first interview on the show. That was really very heartwarming and a very grounding experience for me. So I was mentioning in the beginning of the episode that I've been dealing a lot with my own thoughts, just like going around and around and around in my head, and JC just really reaffirmed for me the beauty of surrendering, like surrendering to the present moment, surrendering to how you feel, and surrendering to whatever power you believe in, because I do believe that there is something out there like kind of guiding us, you know. And for me personally, I keep coming back to like music. For me, I feel like is the thing that just makes it all make sense. Like when life just is so confusing and you don't know what it's really about. For me, it's about music, and for me, it's about my voice. And I feel like in the last week, and maybe even in the last month, it's just like when you start to go on that real path, it feels like the demons just like, they get more armor and they try to get stronger and they try to come after you and like change your path or get you to see if you like really want what you want. And so I get all of these like little tests, and sometimes they come as opportunities, you know, and so you have to learn, like I said in the beginning, to say no. And so I guess this song is kind of about that. It's a very raw version. I finished it at 3:15, and my show starts at 4. But I've been writing it for the last week, and I was just overthinking it, like trying to force it. And ultimately, I think that, like I said, my songs feel like they're already kind of written, and I just have to surrender to the moment and they come out. And so this one is about that. And here it is. Well, I don't know what the meaning of life is, so my best guess is that it must be maybe happiness. 'Cause what is life without that? What is life anyway? I'm just going to talk because I'm having a bit of a vulnerable moment. But like I said, I don't really think that this song is finished. And I didn't even really want to sing it today. But it's been a very valuable experience trying to create it, learning about it. At the end of it, it helped me, like I said, just reaffirm that singing is what I am meant to do. But it's been very tough to be vulnerable here on the show, to show you stuff that like I am creating in my room by myself. And that's kind of what this song is. I'm hoping at the end of this rant that I'll find my lyrics again, but if I don't, that's okay, because I can just sing it again next week. I found it. Well, it might be true that the meaning of life is love. But if that's true, then you have to feel grief too. So what is life without that? And what is life if I have to feel sad? So if I could choose what to do, I would sing. 'Cause what is life without that? And what is life without love? And what is life anyway? What is life anyway? I promise that the full version of, actually, I'm not going to make promises like that, but I know that I will work on this song and bring it back next week. I am searching for people to record music with, so if you're here and you feel compelled or that's something that's on your mind, I would like some musicians to add some depth to my song. I know Marie is already sending people my way, but I just like throwing that out into the universe because I like this show as like a manifestation tool for myself. I lost what I was going to say, but essentially, I feel like this show, it feels like a shifting point for me, and it just feels like a lot of themes are just really, really connecting for me. And I think that, I guess the ultimate takeaway is just to give into the moment and to not judge, you know, like I could very easily go home and think about what I said and why I said it and what I should have said better, or like your song wasn't ready, blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't matter, because what matters is that you are listening, that I am vulnerable, that JC was vulnerable, and that you're gaining something on your healing journey. And it's not about being perfect. And I have all these voices in my head that try to force me to be perfect and to abide by deadlines and spend my time the perfect way and be the perfect person. And none of that is valid or true. So just go have a beautiful day, a beautiful, honest, vulnerable, lovely day. You can find me on Instagram, Carmynn_Bradley. And if you want to sponsor this show and social media shows in general, please email admin@socialmediashows.com. And I will see you next week. Well, I don't know what the meaning of life is, so my best guess is that it must be maybe happiness. 'Cause what is love